Hi there, you're watching The Real Story. I'm Al Terzi with Lori Perez, and our first guest is looking for a rematch. Former state senator Dan Debicella is running again for Connecticut's 4th district seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's challenging three-term incumbent Democrat Jim Himes.
And in some ways, it's 2010 all over again, but maybe in a lot of ways it's not. Thanks for joining us. And I'm interested, Dan, in knowing how you think things are different either in the district or in the country.
Yeah, if you look at it, back in 2010, we were the closest federal race in Connecticut. A swing of 7,000 votes out of 220,000 decided it. So Fairfield County is really a swing district. So now that we're looking at 2014, I think the big difference is there is a sense among all the voters that Washington is broken, and everybody there is part of the problem. Jim Himes, who's now been there for 3 terms, has kind of adopted the Washington culture as his own, whether it's being part of the gridlock over the government shutdown or whether it's actually trading votes for special interest money for his campaign. These are the types of things that people are sick of. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, they want to see change in Washington. And that's a very different feeling from 2010, where it was much more of a partisan election.
Well, you know, I can understand why you feel you might have an easier time this time, given the current atmosphere in which voters find themselves trying to make a decision. But also, you've got the reality that he is now a 3-term incumbent. You know, and it's really hard to get incumbents out of office unless they are really bad. So how are you going to deal with that?
Yeah, there's no doubt incumbents always have an advantage. But I think that what voters need to know is what they're voting for. So with Jim Himes, what they're getting is someone who votes 95% of the time with his party. That's not what the moderate people in Fairfield County want. They have a history of voting for people like Stuart McKinney and Chris Shays, who, while Republicans, only voted with their party 70% of the time. That's the model. That is the mode that I'm in and hope to represent the people of Fairfield County. The other aspect is the fact that Jim Himes has chosen to be a congressman not to solve problems in Fairfield County, but rather to raise money for the Democratic Party. If you actually look at how he's spending his time with lobbyists in D.C., flying to Vail, Colorado, to raise money for the Democratic Campaign Committee. And look, does that go on in politics? Of course it does. But when that becomes your primary focus, rather than representing the people of your district, it's time to go.
So you mentioned, though, that he always parts along with his, he votes along with his party. I mean, let's talk about this government shutdown. Would you be parting with your party to say, listen, we got to stop this shutdown, and you know, especially distance yourself from the Tea Partiers, who were big supports for you in 2010, and say, we're not going to do this?
Yeah, and this is where you have to separate policy from tactics, because policy-wise, I do support repealing Obamacare. It's going to be a disaster. But tactic-wise, you don't shut down the government because you don't get your way. And this is a place where both Democrats and Republicans need to compromise. I think there's an obvious compromise to be made. Republicans need to drop the demand to repeal Obamacare or defund it, and the president needs to be willing to adopt some of the spending cuts that Republicans have proposed. If you do all of that and just meet in the middle, everybody gives up a little something, you can get compromise done and get Washington working again. The problem is you have people like Michelle Bachmann on the right and like Jim Himes on the left, who are unwilling to break with the party, unwilling to talk to each other. I mean, you guys, Al's been doing this for a long time. Back in the days when Reagan and Tip O'Neill were able to sit down together, very different views, but get things done. Even Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, they, even though they had their own government shutdown, they eventually got things done.
So are you blaming Speaker Boehner for part of this problem, as well as the president?
I think everybody's part of this problem. Let's make no mistake about it. This is not a partisan thing. The president's to blame, Democrats like Jim Himes are to blame, and Republicans are to blame as well. Because if you're not willing to talk to the other side, if you're not willing to sit down and give a little bit, you're never going to be able to make divided government work, and that's what we have.
So you're down there in D.C. now, let's say. You'd be saying what and doing what?
Yeah, my proposal would be, let's actually, Republicans scrap the defunding of Obamacare. Instead, let's adopt what's called the penny plan, which says that, Mr. President, we are going to reduce spending by 1% over the course of the next 5 years. 1% a year. That's it. Nothing draconian. Surely he can agree to that. And then we'll talk about what cuts need to be made to actually achieve that over time. So the president gets something. The Republicans stop demanding the repeal of Obamacare, and at least in terms of the government shutdown. And the Republicans get something in terms of being able to eliminate this deficit through responsible spending.
But how are you going to bring these people into the fold, representatives who got into Congress because because of Obamacare. And their constituents are saying, go in there, we're going to vote for you, we're going to put you in office, but you got to get rid of that thing. And now how are you going to convince those people to join the fold?
Well, because people want to get something done. Look, at the end of the day, I'm very passionate about my beliefs as well. I want to repeal Obamacare, but people are so mad that Washington is broken right now. It's in every politician's best interest, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, to get this place working again. And so, look, I'm not telling the Republicans to give up the fight to repeal Obamacare. I think it's going to be a disaster in the next year. I think the American people are going to demand its repeal when they see what a disaster it is. But you don't shut down the government over it. Instead, you start talking to reach a reasonable compromise.
You know, I wanted right now, if we could, to run a quick soundbite from Congressman Himes when he appeared on Sean Hannity earlier.
Here's why you don't negotiate the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. If I showed up at your house with Girl Scout cookies in one hand and a gas can in the other, and I said, I'm going to burn your house down unless you buy my cookies, you're not going to negotiate with me.
So that was a kind of an extreme comment, but why isn't he right? I mean, why should they negotiate?
Well, because, I mean, you hear how angry he is. He sounds so angry at the other side. This is the problem, is if you're in politics, if you're in Congress and you're in divided government, we have Republicans in the House, Democrats in the Senate and the White House, you have to negotiate. And extremists like Jim Himes who are not willing to negotiate, he just said it right there, that is the problem. Now, there are Republicans who sound just like that as well. They are all the problem in Washington, D.C. right now, and we have to get them out.
What are we going to do about Social Security and Medicare? I mean, there's been talk about, well, let's increase the withholding, make it unlimited. I mean, is that going to go anywhere with the Republican group?
You know, I think what you need to do on entitlements is, again, all these big reforms only happen when they're bipartisan in nature. Obamacare is actually the exception to the rule. Social Security and Medicare were bipartisan bills when they first went in, and the last fix on Social Security in '86 was bipartisan. So any fix to Social Security, I think you're going to see very small changes across a number of variables, whether it's how COLA increases are calculated, whether it's, you know, a sliding scale for wealthier people about the amount that they actually get, whether it's the retirement age for very young people
so you would
under
index
40.
it to income or what their benefit
To prices rather than wages. But like all of them are very small changes. And if we make small changes now, we can fix Social Security. If we wait 10 years, it's going to be a disaster. You have to cut benefits 44% if we don't fix this. And that's why we need this bipartisanship to come back to D.C. to actually handle these problems.
Just really quickly, I wanted to, you mentioned how Jim Himes has changed, do you think, over the past couple of years. In what ways do you think that you've changed to become a better candidate? You
know, having done this once before, I really learned a lot about what the people of Fairfield County want, because Fairfield County is such a diverse place, from Greenwich, which is one of the richest cities in Connecticut, to Bridgeport, which is one of the poorest. And really being able to go into all of those cities, understand people's concerns, and then aggregate that up to be able to go down and vote in Congress. That's something that when I was a state senator, I never had to do that. And having campaigned throughout this district now, I understand much, much better the needs of the people who are out there and can represent them better in Congress.
Interesting.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan Debicella, and we'll be watching your campaign as it progresses to next November.
That's right. It's a long time. This is a marathon race now.
No kidding. Thanks, Dan, for being here.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Al.
All right. Up next, well, if